All righty. Hey, welcome into another edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray Preview Show. We're here back for one more week, rain or shine, win or lose. It's Owls football this week. Just Rice Owls, no more FAU Owls. How we feeling, JP? What is the mood in the Roost?
Midweek, I think it's on point. Still work to do on my end in more ways than one, but feeling is this the segment where I'm allowed free reign to talk about the last game, or was that just a general salutation? I don't know.
Both and we're kind of off. It's mid-season. We've got the polish is kind of worn off a little bit. We're kind of spreading our wings, so to speak. So yeah, how are things? And then if you want to peek ahead or behind, tell me about FAU. What you thought?
I was on the Blowtorch radio station in North Louisiana, and it just kind of came to me organically yesterday. This team could be 5-1, and I take a lot of encouragement in that. Not in the sense that they should be 5-1, but they've done a lot of things right where they could be 5-1, or obviously 4-2. I mean, reality, you want to split that Cougars game and the FAU game, but you didn't. And you've got to win those games. It proves work has been done, and you've accomplished a lot. But there's still a lot of work to do. You can't be satisfied with being a 500 team, but still, if you played at this clip, you're going bowling for the first time in a long time. So I've gotten more optimism as the days have separated. That was a tough late road trip getting back early Sunday morning, but knowing that one should have been had. But this game coming up, I always love going to the cozy hamlet of Ruston. And hey, time slows for no man. We march on and break down this one.
Yeah, I think my kind of after I've time to process, I think what we've been able to identify through 6 weeks on this team is that they have all the pieces. In years past, we were just trying to figure out, like, man, can they score? Or man, can they kick field goals? Or man, can they play defense? We've had that one down for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel like we've identified that they can do all those things. Now, can they do them consistently? That's the question. And that's what separates the teams. You know, Bloomgren has often talked about UAB being the standard in this conference. What's kind of set them apart in recent years is the ability to do those things on more Saturdays than they don't. They consistently can score, play defense, and get the stops they need on special teams. So Rice is making that transition. They have those good days where one unit is just superb. The defense has been that unit a lot, and then they can win ugly games. And then we see, Louisiana, the offense kind of turns on, and then things just go rolling. So I guess the question now is not can they? We know they can. It's will they? And if you have the answer to that, you need to not go to Ruston this weekend and hit up those casinos. You need to go to the fancier ones out in the desert.
Yeah, it's echoing what Coach Bloomgren said, too. I know that was your original thought, but a piece of that reminded me of what Coach said yesterday. They've had the pieces there to be able to do that, and they just, for whatever reason, Nate, remember when Nate asked Coach a question yesterday, and Coach is amazing. Like, he gives you his full attention, he's fully present, and he's always giving you his honest opinion. He does not sugarcoat things like a lot of other coaches might do, but he's honest for Rice players and against Rice opponents. But Nate asked him, hey, what do you think was the big thing that went wrong? And Coach paused about 5-10 seconds and said, I really couldn't say it was one thing. It's just a lot of the offense was not clicking and working together. A lot of people didn't do their job on defense. It's a destructive force. You can have Blake Banish eat up a guy, and Josh Piercy comes in for a sack, and that's a success. But you've got to be lockstep on offense, and they haven't been like that. And newsflash, they've got to do that coming up on Saturday because it has been forever and a day since they've won in Ruston.
Yes, and that is a fact. It has been hard for Rice to win in Ruston, but I would also posit that This is a very, very different Rice team that has played in Ruston than the ones that in the past couple years. And it's a very, very different Louisiana Tech team, just even from a roster perspective. If you look at who played and who was available for both teams in the game last year, there was a lot of turnover at Tech with the new coaching staff coming in. Obviously, the highlight of that is at quarterback. Got some of the same skill guys back, some familiar faces on defense too. And then Rice, this was the TJ McMahon, who is he, comes off the bench game last year. Now it's TJ McMahon as the guy, the starter, the quarterback that leads all Rice quarterbacks under Bloomgren in touchdown passes. And this is going to be his sixth start of his collegiate career, which is just, I'm going to keep hammering home that stat because it is bizarre. But not here to focus on Rice, here to focus on Louisiana Tech. Let's start with the aforementioned office. We got Sonny Cumbie coming in from Texas Tech. We got a couple transfers at quarterback, Parker McNeil, who's kind of settled in. How do we feel about the Louisiana Tech offense? It's air raidy, but it's going to be a little bit different maybe than the 13, 14 different versions of air raid that are in the sport today.
It's worrisome because McNeil comes in, big guy. He has a big cannon. And I was prepping here in amongst the technical issues, only on the Heath end. It was all on my end. That they are so efficient. They've got weird, quirky stats. There it is, right page. They are third in the nation in passing yards per completion. Number 2 in Conference USA, actually. Not coming to mind who would be number 1 at that spot, but McNeil
Western.
Duh. Okay, there you go. Yeah. And McNeil's a big reason for that. And because of my own Heath household technical issues, I'm not able to bring you Bordy, and the fans have just really been disappointed with that. But they're number 1 in the nation of 50-yard plays or more. They've got 8 of those on the season. And they're top 10 in the nation in plays of 40-plus yards and 60-plus yards. So the bones are still there that this is a Louisiana Tech team, and they've got a guy named Smoke Harris who has been a thorn in the outside in the past, and they've got Trey Harris, no relation, who's coming off over 100 yards receiving, and they've got Bear, who's one of the top tight ends efficiency-wise in the country. So I know the Louisiana Tech folks, as I was telling you, I was on the radio yesterday, they're kind of bemoaning that their offensive line has been consistent. But I want to say, man, join the club. Like every team in the country can pick nits on their offensive line. But this is a saltier team than their record looks because of that big play potential. And with that air raid nature, the biggest misnomer is that it's all about the throwing the football. And it is, to some extent, but they're going to get a lot of short passes. And as Coach mentioned, how can they tackle in space? So I think a lot of that lends to why McNeil is so efficient. But then again, he's averaging, as I mentioned at the start of this diatribe, he's averaging over 15 yards per completion. So he's doing something right still while they kind of supplement that running game with the short passes out in the flat and beyond. He's still stretching it and going it downfield. So do the Owls corners and safeties, do they play as consistent as they have been the first half of the season? Hopefully they don't regress to some parts of last season and even the USC game where they give up those big oodles of yards at times.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Louisiana Tech leads Conference USA in 30-plus yard plays per game. So this is an offense that is going to be explosive. I think it's really interesting. They're actually tied with UAB, which is maybe not somebody that I'd tap for that level of explosiveness. But I think the difference that you see between the UAB offense and the Louisiana Tech offense, one, they're completely different because one's going to pound the rock and the other one's going to try and throw it. But Louisiana Tech, they're actually just middle of the pack in Conference USA, completing 59.1% of their passes. Parker McNeil has been pretty good at quarterback, but usually when you think of an air raid offense, kind of a stylistic offense like this, even one that wants to take shots downfield, you expect the completion percentage to be a bit better. 60% is just kind of baseline. They've kind of had some inconsistencies getting the balls to their playmakers. You look at, Western Kentucky's at 70%, UTSA is at 67%. that's kind of where you want to be, 65 plus, if you're going to be an air raid offense. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think they have the potential. It's been the consistency that's been lacking with getting that installed. And as explosive as they're going to be, you look at the corners that Rice has and how they've been able to play really, really well, I've thought, for the most part. It's going to be interesting because when Tech has struggled to do more than take those shots and they can't consistently move the football, the offense starts to sputter. And that's where Rice can take advantage of that, because their running game, while their passing game is fantastic, the running game is not something that I think is going to be anything in this game. Louisiana Tech is dead last in Conference USA in rushing offense. We've bemoaned the Rice running game and how inefficient it has been at time. Louisiana Tech is averaging 3 yards per carry on the season. Like, Rice has not been great, but at least they've had games where they've averaged 5 or 6. Louisiana Tech, they just can't run the ball. They can't run the ball, and they're not completing a high percentage clip of their passes for this offense. So I think that's going to be interesting. You mentioned Smoke Harris, a guy who's been there. I feel, Bloomgren said in the media availability yesterday, he felt like he's been at Tech as long as he's been coaching. It kind of feels like
close
that to some degree.
Yeah.
But he's just kind of been a fixture. They're going to get him the ball in space. They're going to take a couple shots down the field with him. He's one guy that I'm just kind of circling, basically led this receiving core last year when it was, it felt like just him, honestly. But he's one guy. Anybody else on offense we need to talk about that Rice is going to have to be careful to pay attention to in this one?
I mentioned in the blurb, tight end Griffin Abear. He's a Lafayette kid, but fourth most among FBS tight ends in yards. So, and that's kind of a Y or just like an extra H-back position, really specifically. And the way Louisiana Tech's done things in the past with Coach Holtz, obviously not having seen Coach Cumbie, it's not always like a Jack Bradley, put your hand in the ground type of tight end. They use them as extra fullbacks at times too. But Abear is another receiving threat. He's got some options. McNeil can't spin it. And just to give the man his respect, Marquise Crosby is their leading rusher. And just putting pen to paper, he averages over 5 yards per attempt. So you have to figure with some of their rushes, because their top two rushers, Crosby and Thornton, are averaging one just under 5 and one over 5. It's everybody else. And imagine if they've taken a lot of sacks, that counts against the net rushing yards too. So maybe that has a lot to do with it. But you're right. It's not a game-breaking type of running game. This is more a game where they have 2 or 3 receivers that could hurt the secondary, and that is a big key. But, yeah, I'd say Crosby and in the backfield, Thornton, also Garner. But Abear at tight end too. Those would be those other names that deserve some respect too.
Yeah, we're not going to go completely off track, but why in the modern era of college football do sacks count against rushing yards?
That's a great sports information debate, I guess. I started out in this crazy industry kind of keeping stats and knowing more about that kind of stuff. And I know the bare bones, but and in the NFL, obviously, it doesn't. I can't really reason that out on the fly like this. That would take a little more thought and critical thinking on that. It doesn't. It's just always the way it's been to me, and that's the way I've always accepted it. So I don't know why, Matthew. I don't.
Well, while I let you filibuster for me, I did go ahead and find out Louisiana Tech actually does lead Conference USA in sacks allowed. That offensive line that Tech fans have been kind of unhappy with has been rather porous. But you go ahead and you take that sack yards, you take those sacks, you do sprinkle some dust on it, do some math on the fly, which is always dangerous, and you're up to 3.6 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Which is
it's not an offense that goes from averaging 5 yards a carry down to the 3.1. But yeah, they still got the thing is that all this, You're like, why are you talking about it so much? Well, it's because they still have those game breakers who can make that one big play. I've been doing this long enough. You cross that Ruston city limits. They've got something in the water there. They've always got speed, cat-like quickness in the backfield, and guys that can stretch it over the top, and a quarterback that can drop it in the bucket like that.
Yeah, it's a good offense. It's a big play offense, and that's kind of been their bread and butter. This is a game that, if Rice was worried about only scoring 14 points against FAU and winning, I'm just going to let you in on a secret right now. They're not winning with 14 points against Louisiana Tech. Honestly, 24 points might not be enough. As good as this Rice defense is, Tech is going to just keep taking chances. So, and that's a good professional transition. We're swapping over to you see what I did there? Swapping over to the defensive side. Yes, I will take all the applause in the comments. And we're going to go look at the defensive side of the ball for Louisiana Tech, which I think is interesting, especially when you look at defenses like this, because I think so. A couple things. First off, you look at the numbers, and this is not a pretty picture. This is statistically one of the two worst defenses in Conference USA. I think you probably have to say, looking at the numbers, that Charlotte is below them. But this is a team that is the worst run defense in Conference USA. They give up 263 yards per game on the ground. They're a little bit better through the air, but again, one of those things is, well, when you can run the football at will, you don't need to be throwing in the third and the fourth quarter because you already have that big lead. So I think it's going to be interesting how Rice matches up with this defense. We've opined on this show and elsewhere that we want to see Rice run the football. JP, if they can't run the football against Louisiana Tech, do we just throw up our hands and say maybe next year? Like this has to be the get right game, right?
It's got to be. And quick question aside, I'm not straying. This has a point, but how many teams in the FBS now? Is it 131, 132?
I believe we're officially 131 with a couple transitions.
And then this is before, obviously, Kennesaw State and Sam Houston State next year and the like.
Right.
But anyway, my point being, no one is worse in the country than the rush defense than Louisiana Tech. Not only dead last in Conference USA, but they're 131 in all of the FBS. So yeah, there's getting to be there. What's the old Spike Dykes? I'm going to mess up the phrase. There's some getting to be got. I think that's the way Spike Dykes said it. But yeah, they give up a ton of yards, and I was again going back to what I said. I wasn't even thinking to this point when I was telling earlier about the honesty of Coach Bloomgren. He came out and told us, "Hey, we've simplified the running game. We've got some ideas for Dean Connors and others, but it's going to be Ari Broussard and Cam Montgomery. It's going to be Cam, and I'm paraphrasing now, but it's going to be Cam Montgomery and Ari Broussard." So, and then Cam was at the podium too, and he had all the Nuke LaLoosh type of quotes, to borrow a crossover sports movie. He had all the good cliches, but I think he was close to not give away too much. But Coach had already come out and say, "Hey, look, we've simplified this. You've got thunder and lightning back there." It's my phrase, with Ari, the bowling ball, the wrecking ball, and the things Cam does. Cam Montgomery fits in with these Louisiana Tech style scatbacks that can jitterbug and turn you around like in a washing machine and just have you come in when you think you're going. He has that kind of juke and jive to his craftiness and his running ability that I think will be very good in this game. Tyler Grubbs is among the nation's leaders in tackles. I think as a freshman, he was up there leading the conference and up there towards the tops nationally. So he's probably their best overall defender. But yeah, this is a team that gives up a lot rushing the football. Was it 475 yards North Texas had last week? So
I lost count.
It's there. It's there to be had. And Al's obviously, when we know this is fascinating chess match of coaching and just this dynamic of this crazy oblong shaped ball, the way it bounces. We know that's the big key But how do they maneuver and kind of duct tape that up on the Louisiana Tech side? And how does Rice set that up on their side? Because we're coming off a week where TJ McMahon would be the first one to tell you he wasn't exactly stellar. He had some big plays to Rosner, but he's looking for a get-right game as well, too. So does TJ getting some momentum going open up some things in the running game? That's a dynamic to watch and listen for, I think, too.
I think it has to, and it has to because we saw in previous games this year where, Rice wasn't running the football really well. I think Houston's a really good example because they would just stack the box and there was no running lanes to be had. But because of that, Luke McCaffrey had free reign over the middle of the field. So you want to be able to do both. You want to run and pass the ball well, but if they're going to play you that way, you take what you can get. So I'm okay with 3 yards per carry if Rice throws for 404 touchdowns. Like we can compromise, but we need points. That's the important part there. And you hit on a couple things with this, this matchup on this side of the ball. I'm really interested to see Cam Montgomery get more run because he's a guy that has just had so many just bad luck injuries throughout his career. Like getting him on the field and keeping him on the field has been a problem. But man, whenever he's been healthy, he's been so dynamic. So it's a balancing game, right? Because you want your sprinkling of 5 to 10 touches of Cam every game. I'd love to give him 15, but can he hold up? What's the best recipe for your offense? I am glad that I'm not the one that's paid to make those decisions, but I'm ready to watch him run because man, I was so bummed we got stopped at 99 yards and a half against USC and couldn't go out there and get to 100. So we're going to see a 100-yard game from Cam Montgomery at some point. He's got 6 games left in his Rice career to give it a shot. So I want to see that. You mentioned but back on the Louisiana Tech side, Tyler Grubbs on defense. I think we even might be selling him short a little bit. I think he's the best linebacker in Conference USA, and he's probably one of the better ones in the nation. This guy is just, you talked about, how good Rice's linebacker play has been in the past year with, Blaze Aldridge, Antonio Montero, Myron Morrison with a 15 tackle game against FAU. He's coming along. Grubbs has just kind of been unreal. That was in the notes for Louisiana Tech this week. Grubbs has 5 or more tackles in was 26 of his 27 career games. So this is not just a guy that is productive. He is going to produce, and he's going to take guys down time and time again. So he's been kind of the linchpin to making sure this Louisiana Tech run defense is even viable to any degree because he's been the guy cleaning up after the front has kind of, wear down. So he's interesting. I think up front, we got to talk about Kiwi Rose on the defensive line. This is a guy who's kind of been up and coming, a redshirt sophomore, but I don't even know what redshirt means anymore because some of these sophomores have been here for 2 seasons. Some have been here for 5 with COVID and everything else going on. But he's been one of the guys that have kind of circled as coming up and growing in his role. He's going to be interesting. And when Rice has not been able to run the ball, it's because guys on the front have stepped up and had big games and given the Rice O-line some problems. So he's one that I'm going to be watching. And then we haven't talked a lot about the secondary because we're looking at the run matchup here. But I think you got to look at this because this has been a secondary that I think opportunistic is probably the best way to kind of talk about the back end for Louisiana Tech. Over the past couple years, they've had a couple NFL guys back there in the secondary who, man, they have just bailed out this team, good defense or bad, by making that big play. And BJ Williamson, again, another guy who I felt like has been there forever, but this is a guy who can tackle. He's 3rd on the team with tackles and is just an interception machine, a pass deflection machine when you send it his way. So he's going to be the one guy that I don't think Rice is going to scheme around. They're pretty confident in the abilities of their receivers to go out and win. But he's one matchup. If he can shut down part of the field, that makes it more complicated for McMahon, who, is still growing in his time as a starter. So I just threw out a handful of different names. I'm giving you the full breadth. We got a couple minutes left here. Is there, just looking at this Tech defense, big picture, an X factor, something in particular that you are looking at or concerned about? Your kind of high level thoughts at how Rice is going to fare on this side of the ball.
Well, I don't know about high level, Matthew, but I'll give you my thoughts anyway. No, I think they have a turnover forced in 11 straight games, so that's quite the trend. That doesn't happen by accident. They're a team that can turn you over. You mentioned Williams; he had a pick up in Denton, and Jaden Cole is a young guy that we haven't mentioned yet. He led them in tackles and safety. That happens when you're giving up 475 rushing yards last week, but he's led them in tackles in back-to-back games. He had 9 against North Texas and 11 recently against UTEP. And they're 7th nationally in defensive touchdowns. They've got 2, just like Rice has had the scoop and score from 4 yards from Chamberlain, and then Gabriel Taylor's 91-yarder against McNeese. So they're a defense that can flip it on a dime pretty quick too. And like you've already mentioned, and Rice is starting to get that symmetry between the defensive line and the secondary that's got its act together here this season. That's been the motto for Louisiana Tech for a decade plus. That's what they've done, and that's what frees up a guy like Grubbs. Not selling him any way short. Don't use this as a clip or reading into that. He is a terrific player, but when you combine a terrific ball hawk linebacker with that defensive line that can get in your lap. And we saw some problems with that last week with TJ McMahon. That's what accents a guy like Grubbs even better. So Williamson DB, Cole DB, another guy to listen and or watch for. And with Grubbs, who we've already gushed about. Yeah, this is a defense that's prone to the run, but again, you're at the FBS level. Well, this is rebuilding. This is not a team that is in the gutter rebuilding. They're a team that, while they had some guys through the portal, they had some good guys come in, and they're going to be okay defensively. Rice just has to find their spots, and like you said, they're road favorites for the first time in a long time too. I can't remember the last time that's happened, and they can't.
You reminded me.
Yeah. I can remind people
looked this
things.
up. Yeah, you do a great job. I looked this up yesterday when I was recording the Roost Pod with Carter Spires. Go plug if you want the full extensive game recap where we do our postmortems and whatever you do after a win celebrations. Go listen to the Roost Pod wherever you find your podcast. But fun fact, this will be the first time Rice is a road favorite since 2019. And that was the only other time under Mike Bloomgren where Rice has been a road favorite. So this is the second time in 5 years that Rice has been expected to win by the guys in the desert on the road.
19. I assume you have the game. Let me table talk this. It wasn't. It would have been at. That have been a. Was it at UTEP?
No, it was at UTSA. Rice was a 5-point favorite in the Dome.
Wow.
And Rice did have a lead in that game, and then things kind of snowballed and went the other way.
I remember that one now because the previous time there last season, it didn't go from the jump. I was like, wait a second. But yeah, my games were overlapping as you do when you get in middle age. I was misremembering, but yeah, I remember that.
You want to go to alternate histories that saved Frank Wilson's job at the time. He gets the extra year, and then boom, 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 UTSA gets Jeff Traylor. So did winning that game free up UTSA in the time continuum to eventually wind up with Jeff Traylor as their head coach? You never know.
We'll never know. I bet he still would have been there. He still would have been there.
Yeah, I would think so too. He's doing all right. So yeah, this is a big one. Rice a road favorite. Gotta win this one, especially, you 500 in the first half of the season. You get to 500 in the back half. You are bowling, and man, I'm going to be a little bit selfish. JP, I'd love better than 500, and I think we've seen that this team is capable of it when they put everything together. So,
hey, last thing. Because I thought of this and I've got to speak this out into existence. If you look, like Rice has had, we've seen, is what I meant to say, the toughest part of their schedule. What do we say? These last 5 fun-filled, action-packed episodes, we said, hey, when you're looking before the year, I don't mind admitting, you look, okay, that one is winnable. That one might be a tough one. We all do that. Don't say you don't. We all do that. But you look at the schedule that's coming up, it's there to be had. The kind of the theme of this game, it's there to be had. So, but you've got another thing I like to talk about, Matthew. They can't look ahead, but we can. We sure can. But
amen.
Yeah. There's this second half of the schedule is much more forgiving than the first half, but that doesn't make it easier if I can have my cake and eat it too. Because I like using food analogies. But anyway, go ahead.
When you circled it in the preseason, you had more circles for wins in the back 6 games than you did in the first 6. I think that's absolutely true. And we've seen where this team is at. So we'll see. We'll do one game at a time to talk about. We will look ahead and cheat because we can. And we will be back next week to, I guess we'll sneak a little bit about the last trip to Rice to Ruston in Conference USA. Saying bye-bye to some of these CUSA schools. We're in the final stretch as a CUSA football team. Bizarre. We'll get there.
It's really weird.
Yeah. I know. And then we'll on to the AAC, and we'll go into New Orleans instead of Ruston. So, no offense, I'll make that trade. So, but that's it for this week. We're going to sign off. JP Heath and Matthew Bartlett here, giving you the owl salute. We will be back next week. But until then, Rice fight.
Never dies.